So, welcome to our event. Our event, Are You Actively Mobile in Your City? What makes you move consciously? Great that you made it here. My name is Anja. I'm one of the three organizers of this event, and we will introduce ourselves in a minute. But before, I would like to explain that this event is part of a series of events which take place this week, because this week is the Conscious Cities Festival, and the Conscious Cities Festival is organized by the Center for Conscious Design. And this is a think tank which is spread all over the world. People from different nations and countries are organized in city groups and interest groups, and are thinking about conscious design, about cities of the future. And our event is one of this, so we are very happy that you made it to the event of Conscious Berlin, Conscious Amsterdam, and Conscious Munich. Martina, maybe you can start introducing.
So thank you, Anja. So I welcome you from Conscious Berlin. I'm Martina. I'm a transformative researcher coming from the field of architecture and design. I worked several years in construction and interior design, and then specialized in human mobility and space use research within my Masters of Urban Futures at Potsdam University of Applied Sciences. So I had the privilege to work internationally in Singapore in the mobility and neighborhood planning, and to open last year within the Center for Conscious Design the ecosystem human mobility, and a few months before the new Conscious Berlin chapter. And with this, I pass on to my colleague Julian Wassenaar from the new Conscious Amsterdam chapter.
Hi, thanks, Martina. Hi, everyone. Welcome. So my name is Julian. I am based in Amsterdam, as you can see, but I'm originally from France. My background is Master of Science in Urban Policy. I've studied urban planning and urban policy. And my interests are really connected to two big things. One is early childhood development, which I've really discovered by working for about 4 years for the Bernard van Leer Foundation here in the Netherlands. And then I moved on to studying cycling, or working on cycling and active mobility. And now I'm working at a not-for-profit organization that's in the business of growing cycling cultures globally, and it's called Bikes BYCS. So I find myself at the CCD at the perfect intersection of these two topics. And so my role in the CCD is really to manage the ecosystem of healthy childhoods and families connected to my interest in childhoods, and also to help grow the local chapter here in Amsterdam. So it's about me, and now I'll pass on over to Anja.
So, hi again. As you know, my name is Anja. I'm from Munich, and my background is in psychology. So I was working in organizational development, all the topics to foster well-being for people at work, like conflict mediation, working on the culture, coaching. And I'm also passionate about architecture and how spaces influence our moods and our emotions and how we behave. And that's why I changed to workplace consulting and change management. And because I really wanted to know how it works, I studied neuroscience applied to architectural design. And now I'm trying to combine all of this and work at the intersection. And for all of this, I have in mind that I would like that we find solutions with foster our all well-being. Yes, but enough from our side. Now we are curious where you are all joining from, and maybe you can put your answers in the chat and let us know which cities and parts of the world you are from. So I see answers popping up, lots of people from Europe, but also some people from Asia, Southeast Asia, also South Asia. So thank you. Great that you're all here. And now I'll tell you what we plan to do in the next almost 2 hours. So at the moment we are in the introduction part, and after this, Martina will explain you why we did all this and what is the background of our project. And then Julian will take you on to a journey. It's an interactive journey where we are interested in your thoughts, in your ideas, in your experiences. And after a little tiny break, we invite you to watch our film. We are very happy about our film because we have contributions from different people who all are thinking about mobility, about conscious human mobility, active mobility, child development, and also mobility and well-being. So we are showing our film, and afterwards we have invited some of the contributors of the film to discuss with us a bit further. And then probably the time is almost over and we have some concluding thoughts and give you further links to connect with us. So before we start the interactive journey, Martina is now giving you a quick info about the background and the why of our project.
Thank you. Yeah, why is this participatory research project? It is rather, when we click, it is rather the question why we like to illuminate the meaning of the angle on active and conscious human mobility and its potential to support well-being and child development. So here we have to look back in the human mobility ecosystem where we illuminate the interrelations, how people move, perceive, and build urban space. How aware are we humans of this context of meaning? How consciously mobile are we humans when we are on the move? And what parameters will lead us to move consciously in our cities in the future? So based on the science of teleology by the Swiss sociologist Lucius Burckhardt, I define conscious human mobility as an active and deepening way of moving in spatial perception to sharpen the awareness of one's own mobility as space use, whether you can say influence on urban space. While asking how will we walk our cities in the future, I like therefore to define sustainable human-centered mobility holistically, taking into account local conditions and globally relevant influencing factors. So the last month, CCD internally and with colleagues from Singapore, we illuminated together what does it mean to move actively and consciously in our neighborhood, and this during COVID. Exciting insights emerged and the interrelations to the research approaches and ecosystems of Julia Mercelot with Healthy Childhood and Families, and to Anja Kluge from the Holistic Wellbeing Ecosystem arise. So how does active mobility influence well-being? And how active mobile are the youngest among us? And how will we move in our cities in the future in a sustainable way? These are the questions, for example, which bring us together and why we decided to go into a common research project. Our research goal is thereby to deepen the definition of active and conscious human mobility and gain better understanding of its potential to support well-being and child development as a status quo. We like to forecast and explore the concept of future-oriented mobility and its meaning as space use, raise awareness for the necessary common discourse on the topic mobility itself, and like to strengthen the importance of interdisciplinary work as well as of participatory research and planning. Here's a frame of the CCD, and our overarching aim is specific to these, and the Conscious Cities movement offers a unique opportunity to make a collaborative project on future-oriented mobility. And therefore, conscious design can help us better understand and account for the way people move and interact in space, which can ultimately lead to a more sustainable continuum between people and space, you can say a sustainable human-space relationship. So please stay tuned for our anthology paper. The next days it will be published with the insights we gained so far. And with this, let's now embark on this journey together and continue. And I will pass on to my colleague, Julia Mercelot, who will guide you through the interactive part of this session.
Yes, thank you, Martina, for giving us some background information on how we got here, where we are now. And so now I'm going to invite everyone to join me in an interactive and introspective exercise to analyze our own mobility and our mobility behaviors. And so I'm going to first share my screen and take you to a Miro board where we'll be going step by step through the exercise together. So give me a moment. One second, I need to find the Miro board. Here we go. Please let me know when you can see it.
Yes, we see. Perfect.
Perfect. Thank you, Martina. So before we dive into the exercise, I'm going to present a little bit some instructions about how we're going to go about this exercise. First, it's meant to raise core themes related to active mobility and connect them with our own lived experiences. So that's kind of the objective of this exercise. Each one of you be invited to think about one active mobility journey that you did maybe recently. So maybe walking, cycling, whatever other forms you can think of, kayaking, skateboarding, everything goes. Together, we will then go through a series of questions, so one by one, and we'll have the time to go through them, and you'll be invited to write your answers in the chat, and then we'll be commenting and reacting on those. We aim to spend about 4 minutes per question, so there'll be plenty of time to kind of reflect and think together. Before we dive into the exercise itself, I want to just spend a bit of time to elicit what we mean by a journey. And so, of course, I think what comes to my mind first when we think of a journey is a spatial journey from origin to a destination point. But of course, we can think also of journeys in terms of chronology with a beginning and an end in time. It's also something that is made of interactions. It's made of people or the lack of interactions in some cases. It represents embedded aspirations, choices, culture, and habits, whether we're aware of them or whether we're conscious of them or not. It influences and also is influenced by our own mood and our own feelings, and it impacts our health, our body, and our well-being as well. And the last point that I want to bring is that the journeys that we do can also be acts of affirmation. It can be political statements, or it can be also a marker of belonging to a community. This is also a layer that is often less conscious, but is sometimes really there. So we would like to think of all of those layers together. Obviously, you don't have to think about all of these layers for each of the questions, but it's just to kind of get inspiration for us to think about these topics from many different angles. So with that being said, let's start with the exercise. And so the first step before we dive into the questions is for you to think of a journey that you recently completed in active mobility or walking, cycling, or any other forms, and kind of stick with that journey, because we'll use this as the base, as the example for all the other questions in the exercise. So leave 30 seconds or 1 minute, and then just let me know in the chat by writing yes when you're done and you've chosen your example. I see a lot of yeses, so I'm going to move us ahead. Just let me know if you need more time. So the next step, we'll look at step 2, which is kind of before the journey. So take the journey that you've chosen and think even before you started doing it. Think about what motivated you to choose active mobility for this journey, which factor played into that decision. That could be, just out of habits. Maybe you didn't think about it explicitly, maybe you did, but just kind of think along about why did you choose to take this form of transportation for that trip instead of something else like a car or a bus or the metro. And then when you have that answer ready and feel like sharing, please add it in the chat so we can see it.
And can I just ask a question in between? As you're recording the session, is it just for you to have it, or will you publish it anywhere?
That's Martina, do you want to answer that one?
The event will be published on our CCC site. And normally the whole session we are doing here, so that people can enjoy it later, because we are coming from 38 chapters and not every person can join in at this time. And therefore we record it and publish it at our CCD site on YouTube.
Okay. Thanks.
Yeah, you're welcome.
So I'm seeing already an answer from Tim in the chat. Everyone else, feel free to just write. Could be a word, could be a sentence, whatever you feel like answers this question best. Okay, so we're starting to keep writing if you haven't already, but I'm going to start to comment a little bit because the answers are already quite interesting. So we're starting already to see a couple of different trends across the answers. So practicality, flexibility, and in the first answer from Tim, we can see them coming up as well in other answers. The ability to kind of divert and to kind of choose which way you'll be taking kind of on the go is also something that is coming up. Sports, health, just the general positive experience of being outside in good weather, or in bad weather, like Aishwarya is saying, in cold and damp winter day. That can also be part of the experience, the connection to the environment, right? Right, lovely. There's also some elements of social interaction I see here in Maximilian Wall's answer, for example.
Mm-hmm.
I'm going to wait a little bit more and see if there are any other answers coming in, and then we can move along to the next question. Ooh, another one came up, affordability. Thanks, Alex, for that answer. Alex is my colleague, by the way. New experiences, visiting the destinations. Okay, so there's a lot about moving, about connecting, about interacting in a way that connects a bit to our consciousness of the space. Nice little connection to conscious design here. Great, thank you very much, everyone. I'll move us to the next question, but you can keep thinking along this one if you like. So the next question that we have, it relates still to before the journey. It's still at step 2, before you get out of the door. But it's more to looking at the routes. How did you choose the routes? What played into the decision? So in the first question, some people mentioned the ability to divert and to kind of not stick to the routes. But I'm curious to think about whether, how did you choose that route, and whether that route or that played into the decision to choose active mobility here. Was chosen, you didn't choose it. Okay, that's a good answer as well. Maybe you didn't choose it. But maybe for those who did, feel free to write some of the factors that came through your mind. If it's a journey that you do several times or regularly, do you, for example, choose different routes for the same journey? That's also interesting to explore here. So we're starting to see also a wide range of answers. Some people mention speed, some people mention noise levels, so the fact that routes could be more quiet than others, going to nature, going away from the cars, interesting points. Some people didn't have a route in mind and wanted to be surprised and explored. Others were thinking of it from a time-saving perspective. perspective, or a just purely topographical perspective, having a route with less variations in the inclination, just for being able to cycle more easily, I guess. Interesting comment here also about being able to choose the stops. So being able to kind of trip chain, or to kind of connect different destinations in one journey, as well as feeling good. So we have also here quite a range between experience, between practicality, convenience, and then anything else. I'm just reading some of the other answers. Give me a second. So there's also this choice moment about taking the more direct route that maybe may be louder and a bit busier, or taking a longer route, so getting to the destination later on, but having a more pleasant experience. That's an interesting also choice to explore a bit further. And there's one from Kelvin that I find interesting as well. Try not to annoy motorists on the ride. So being able to avoid kind of other space users who might be somehow in conflict or in competition for the use of space. That's an interesting theme as well. Very nice. Thank you, everyone. So we'll move on to the next step, which is step 3, during the journey. And we'll be asking specifically 2 questions now coming up about the moment, the journey itself. So I mean, some of you have already started answering some of those questions, which is fine. But maybe let's zoom in on a moment that you had during the journey, and kind of which was maybe more stressful, or on the contrary, more enjoyable, if you can remember. And kind of describe what made it specifically so stressful or enjoyable, and whether you would change things if you could to make it more enjoyable or less stressful. So I'm starting to see some answers related to, a lot of them relate to the presence of nature and being able to interact and experience it. That's for the enjoyable part, I'm assuming, when I'm reading. And then you also have stress usually related to other bigger users of the roads. Again, quietness, interaction with animals or nature, having a playground for only a few people. So non-crowded playgrounds. That sounds like an attractive reasons to choose active mobility, to be able to stop by there. So I think I'm seeing quite a few trends here. More nature is enjoyable, traffic is not. Stress relates to maybe too much contact, or maybe conflictual contact with other users. Being able to pause, rest, and have a diversity of experience comes in the enjoyable parts. Okay, great. I'll move us along to the next one, which looks specifically at the social element. So maybe you don't have an answer for that question if you didn't interact with anyone during your trip. That's also absolutely fine. But if you did you interact with someone? And if so, then who was it? Was it someone you already knew, or was it someone that you didn't know before the trip? And how did you interact? And then do you also have specific places or rituals for specific places or specific people on your trip? So if it's a regular trip that you did, do you always stop by at this cafe, or do you kind of go by a park specifically because you like the place and you always do that? It's kind of became a ritual in a way. So if you have some of those, and it's fine if you don't, but if you have some of those, we'd be very interested to hearing about those. Interesting. So maybe there we can dive a bit more then later into kind of the levels of interaction with other people that active mobility allows us to. So there's eye contact. Maybe you have many opportunities to make eye contacts with many people around the city, but you also have deeper interactions, taking a walk with a colleague to get to know people better, for a new colleague in this case. Someone trying to explore and discover So that can also be a sort of form of ritual or habit. Noticing smiles, I like that answer. Interacting with nature being an affordance for interacting with other people. Lovely. We have a lot of very interesting detailed answers. Thank you so much. Interactions with other active mobility users. Stopping by for an espresso and an Italian croissant. As a French person, I have to say there's no such thing as an Italian croissant, but I'll let it go. That was a joke. Okay. Connecting with children, waving, smiling to children. That's lovely. Thank you, everyone. I'll move us to the last step of this exercise, which is thinking about once after the journey, once we're arrived or we're done. And here we're interested in zooming into feeling. So how did you feel after that specific journey? Do you remember if you felt a specific way? Were you feeling more light, clear-headed, stressed, anxious? You know, it can be the whole range of feelings. And why do you think you felt that way? Felt grateful. That's a lovely feeling after a journey. Refreshed, relaxed, rested. Refreshed again, happy. Oh. Happy as well, Aishwarya, even in the cold snow and the steep slopes. Arriving on time and being happy for that. Yes, indeed. Oh, beautiful words here as well. Enchanted. I'm interested in that one. Stimulated. Lovely. The incidents can also impact your mood, obviously. We've heard a lot of positive feelings, but there can also be some not so positive ones, depending on the interactions and experience we've had. Personally, I remember having a near accident on my bicycle and that making me feel extremely tense the entire day. That can also happen. Alex mentioned something interesting here as well. It was a pleasant and efficient way of getting there without feeling rushed, and felt connected to the surroundings and to humans. And in that sentence, I'm going to extrapolate a bit, and also I think I connect to that because active mobility allows me to predict very well the moment at which I will arrive. If I take my bike or decide to walk, for example, I know almost to the minute when I will arrive, and therefore I'm not really stressed about potential delays as much as if I would take, let's say, public transport or even driving around with a car. Thank you, everyone, for your contribution. I'm going to take us to the last question, and then after this we can close this exercise and go on with the program. So it's still after the journey, still in step 4, but now I'm going to ask a question that maybe some of you have more direct experience with, and maybe some have to resort to your imagination a bit more. Imagine you were doing this trip, the same trip that you were doing already, but with a baby, with a toddler, with a young child. And if you were already imagining of a trip you were doing with a child, then imagine doing it without them. But the point is here exploring the difference of doing a trip with a child or without a child. So imagine you were doing this trip with a baby or with a young child with you. What would you have done differently, if anything? And would you have felt differently? If so, how? And I'm gonna leave a bit more time for answering this one because I appreciate it's a bit more imaginative. So here already in the answers, we're seeing some factors increase. So for example, not taking any roads without a bike lane, meaning perception of safety becomes much more important in the trip, which means that having safe infrastructure becomes also more important to enable that trip with a child. Time factor changes. So yes, have factor in the time it takes to take along a little one. Being more cautious, having additional equipment, maybe a bit more complex logistics as well. Maybe having to focus more on the child, meaning maybe focusing less on the surrounding. There's also mention of some maybe difficult blocking points along the journey. For example, going up 40 steps to a train platform, which may have led Tim to choose a car over another form of mobility. Going slower, looking for public transport. Also interesting answers here about the type of interactions, singing more songs, chatting around surrounding, pointing interesting things. So there's also maybe more or different types of interaction coming in. I like that answer too. Looking for areas to play in, to get some exercise. And changing the journey for achieving that is also an interesting answer. So maybe someone traveling with a child would take a whole different journey or route, let's say. Uncertainty. There's also an interesting point here about unpredictability that comes with going around with a baby or a toddler that may have certain needs, needs to rest more often, or diaper change, or who knows what. Big difference if it's a baby or a toddler, absolutely. Whether you can carry or they have to walk along or cycle along at their own pace, and all the different kind of attention needs that they may have along the different ages. Absolutely. Good point, Mike. Right. Lovely. So thank you everyone for taking part. This is the end of this part of the exercise, or the interactive part of this session. And so we'll have a discussion later on, and we'll be able to dive a bit deeper in those themes, hopefully with some of our speakers here on the call. So I really enjoyed reading some of your answers. I think those themes that came out were really the themes that also come out in our own research process, and then you'll probably also notice some of them in the movie when we show it. So thank you very much. I hope that you kind of had a good moment to reflect also on maybe your own mobility, maybe discovered a few things from answers from others. I will stop sharing it right now, and then we can go on with the rest of the program. So Anya, if you could share the slides again, that would be best. Okay, so the next part of the session, we've decided to take a little bit of a break here. And so the way that we're going to be doing it is to give you an option, give you a choice. So either you can turn off your camera and take a break, stretch, go get a coffee, whatever you would like, or you can stay and discuss further. So if you'd like to talk about some of the things that came up, just leave your camera on. You'll be spread into 3 different breakout rooms. Martina, myself, and Anya will be in each will be in them. And so if you want to keep on chatting, just stay on with your camera on. If you just want to break, still stay connected, just turn your camera off and then come back in 10 minutes.
So I'll do breakout sessions and see you all here at 5 to 3 for the film. I'm back. I hope you enjoyed the break, and maybe for all the ones who were in the breakout rooms, does anybody want to share 1 or 2 sentences how you liked it?
I was talking with I think he's here, Christian, and so we might get a new conscious chapter maybe in Brussels. Sorry if I put you out there, Christian, but I thought that was interesting. Someone was you were looking into kind of how to explore that. So I thought that was interesting.
In our room, we, I think, are all connected, or at least know of each other. So it was a little bit of, just connecting and seeing how everyone's doing, talking about everyone's exciting books they're putting out. And it was really nice. Great idea, by the way.
Nice. Does somebody of the first room, second room also want to share a thought?
We were in the same room and we talked about different experiences of cycling in different German and one Indonesian city. And I think it was interesting to hear that even within German cities, the experience of how well the biking infrastructure is developed really differs. And for example, in Essen, which Gina talked about, apparently it's really less developed than in Munich. And I think it's sometimes easy to forget that from a Berlin perspective, that maybe compared to other cities, it's actually working quite well in Berlin. Yeah, Katrin, would you like to add something to this?
I just add what we had the last question in the journey. We really it was really inspiring for aspiring because we took it a little bit farther and had a discussion about elder people or even teenagers. So these different sorts of population. This is interesting to think about and to step in these shoes. So thanks for this inspiration.
Thank you for sharing your thoughts. Great that you are having a good time. I hope if you took a break, enjoyed your break, maybe you got yourself some popcorn, because now we are showing our film, which we are very happy about, because we got contributions from over 20 participants from 8 different countries, who were all talking about mobility in connection to well-being, and also mobility in connection to child development. So I will now show the film.
Definitely, I'm moving actively around my city. Since I love to do sports, I'm just either jogging all the time or I just walk and give me a nice walk around the city. I love strolling around the city in the parks, for example.
Living in a city that makes walking and cycling the easy choice means I get to be actively mobile every time I leave my house.
Active mobility in Ho Chi Minh City, so that's the walking. Especially when I walk in the park, because I can feel the fresh air and it's good for my health, and I can meet my friends or a lot of tourists in Ho Chi Minh City. That's wonderful.
I'm very active because in a city you have to first be very mobile. You have to move from place to place, whether it's for pleasure, work, just for all reasons. Especially after coming out of quarantine, we are in search of this mobility and interaction.
To move consciously that I can just park my motorbike in somewhere, and then just go and walk in and do exercise. Yeah.
And in terms of conscious mobility, what that means to me is being able to be a part of the social fabric of the city that I live in, feeling a part of the community, getting to meet with strangers, people I know, and interact with the world around me. And to me, that's one of the most important things of living in a conscious city, and one that allows for all mobilities for all people.
And then now that I understand the conscious part of it, we're actually including why I like Berlin and why I like Mexico City. So this consciousness in this way has to do with social interactions. It has to do with community, and the community building is very important, at least for me.
Ben.
Hello, I'm Sarah.
We're from Sydney, Australia. And what moves us consciously in Berlin is the amazing world-class public transport.
The M8, my best friend.
The M8, the main. It's so fast and so efficient, and there's always plenty of it. The entire city is covered. That's what moves us consciously in Berlin.
Is a really important factor for my well-being, and the simple reason is mobility is the basis for everything. I need a good infrastructure.
Before the pandemic, I was a big fan of public transportation, and I hope to eventually be able to get back on it with a good feeling.
Mobility is one of the most critical influencers of my well-being. For example, traffic, noise, pollution, lack of space in parking, all these things cause stress and are painful time wasters. For me, mobility means freedom.
But at the same time, of course, you need to be aware of the consequences.
Digitalization might soon help us make a sustainable decision once the rest is serviced and automated. A good start to move consciously, unconsciously.
So the infrastructure and design of the city is going to make you experience it differently. It's going to make you discover it differently. So that would be the difference. Not preferred, no, because I wouldn't come back to Berlin if I didn't like it. But I love Mexico as well.
For example, a nice neighborhood, mobility, flexibility, accessibility, safety, weather, or the geographical situation.
The whole geographic location of the city of Munich. So I love the mountains, I love the lakes.
It's primarily the look of the city, the architecture, the green spaces. And I also really like it when the city's on the water, as is the case with Munich, near the Isar.
So I need something green in order to relax.
I very much value green spaces, so being able to go to the green, having fresh air, or realizing sport activities outside. But I also very much value like a good social network.
Most important for myself is the variety of possibilities and the liveliness of people on the move.
Cultural aspects like theater, operas. I need new impulses, new ideas to enjoy. And last one is food. So I love the restaurants, the cafes here.
Having a high proximity to my daily activities. So being able to go to a restaurant, going to a bar, or going to a supermarket, and this ideally all within my own neighborhood or within an acceptable reach.
No cars, and I like no bumps in the road, so I can go up and down, but also big hills, but not as big as a mountain. And so I can just go,
How about when you walk around the street in Bangkok? What do you like the most?
Mama.
Children, even young children, are very playful and curious in their interactions with the world around them and actively seek out stimulation and challenge.
Young children will be delighted when they see plants, trees, or other natural elements in the area. My 6-year-old daughter, for example, loves it when she bumps into cats or other young kids in the streets.
She reacts the most to the trees and the sky, and she interacts the most with the people in the street.
When traveling by foot, toddlers tend to interact with their caregivers, having conversations around their surroundings, observing others around them, and pointing out interesting sights and sounds.
In many cities, the basic transport infrastructure isn't set up for everyday walking or cycling with a small child. Even if there are sidewalks or cycle paths, they may not go to the destinations that this group needs. Their travel needs tend to be more local and neighbourhood-based.
When I walk in my neighborhood with my baby in a stroller, the challenges I face are the noises of the streets, the honking of the cars, the police sirens, the loud motorcycles, as well as the fact that the sidewalks are too thin.
Where we live, there are many high-rise condos, malls, and shops. However, there are just no public parks in the area, only private playgrounds and pools within each condos, so it's really hard to interact with other kids or families in the neighborhood.
With the high density of vehicles on the roads, the lack of bike lanes and the lack of awareness in drivers makes cycling with toddlers a dangerous mode of mobility.
To make the trip easier, I would start by changing the attitudes and cultures of drivers to give the right-of-way to pedestrians, especially caregivers with very young children.
There needs to be a distinct shift in the narrative around how changes in infrastructure or speed limits benefit all road users. This is also tied to the perception of who owns the road.
I listen to the heart and I feel the breeze. In and out. This is the movement. This is the rhythm of life.
So, welcome back. We are very curious what you think about the film, but we don't have time to ask everybody. So I thought you maybe want to write in the chat a word which describes what you think about the film, or maybe also a thought.
Nice brain and soul food. Lovely and lively. Ah, cool. Tim Gill, thank you. So these greetings go to Yukari, who is hopefully joining us. I think, yeah, she's in. The girl under the bridge, the beautiful musician. It's very moving. Yes, Aishwarya asked us if she can watch it again. You can watch it again. We will upload the whole film later on our YouTube channel. Experiencing with all senses, yes. Thank you, Dina. Yes.
So, as I told you before, we invited the contributors of our video, and some of them are now here in our discussion panel. And yes, I'm curious about their thoughts on the film now that they saw the final film, and hand over to you, Martina, as you will go with us to the discussion round. And yeah, as she just said, the film we will upload so you can watch it with no time lag or whatever technical issues again.
So thank you, Anja. Perhaps we can go one slide ahead. That's perfect. And so I'm happy that in this discussion round, also the same people are in, which are part of our contribution. So for first, in the name of Julian, Anja, and me, I'd like to thank you once again, for your contribution, which is really wonderful and made it to this film. And so before we start with the open discussion, it will be an open discussion round. Just the info for the audience, you are all the time invited to write into the chat box your inspirations, questions. We will do our best to include them in the discussion round. And before we start, I would love to hear your opinion, Tim, Melissa, Chris, and Maximilian, with one word perhaps. How do you like it?
Yeah, thought-provoking.
As I said, brain and soul food.
Brain and soul food.
Oh, you want me to come up with a word too?
Yeah.
No, aspirational, inspiring, definitely. Yeah, something to hopefully stimulate cities to do better, I think.
Thank you. So perhaps before we open the discussion, it would be nice if you could just shortly, briefly introduce yourself. Perhaps we're starting with Tim in London. Is this fine?
Sure. Hello, everyone. Yes, my name is Tim Gill. I'm based in London. I'm an independent researcher and writer and consultant, and all of my work really engages with questions about children's outdoor play and mobility and their evolving relationships with the people and places around them. And I had a book published earlier this year called Urban Playground: How Child-Friendly Planning and Design Can Save Cities. And really the aim of that book was to sort of elevate the status of children when it comes to city planning.
Thank you. Who likes to be the next? Perhaps Melissa and Chris from Delft?
Sure. Yeah, so I will let Chris introduce himself. My name is Melissa Bruntlett, and as it says, I've been working in cycling advocacy and more broadly now just urban mobility advocacy for the better part of a decade. That started actually with my own journey with our two children and has sort of become this larger animal, leading to Chris and I writing two books together, the most recent of which is Curbing Traffic.
Thank you.
I am Melissa's other half, Chris. Yeah, she's I think described a lot of what we do, and I spend now my Monday to Fridays working with the Dutch Cycling Embassy, which is a public-private partnership based here in the Netherlands that exports Dutch knowledge and expertise to cities and regions around the world.
Thank you. And so now we go to Munich, to Maximilian.
Thank you. So my name is Maximilian Wolf. I'm based in Munich for a profession. I'm a professor for corporate management and a consultant, and my focus is on change and transformation. And as being always on the move due to my profession, I'm really looking for simple and sustainable forms of mobility. So I'm really interested in that topic from a private side and from, well, my personal point of view. Thank you.
Thanks a lot. So, yeah, I will now open up the discussion with one question. And so in this film, we saw from every person from city to city that people illuminated and expressed the meaning of active and conscious mobility in diverse views. So when we now think about the future and ask ourselves how we want to move and live in our cities in the future, in cities which are human-centered and instead of car-oriented. So the question is, what is then the most striking issue for you at the moment to illuminate regarding a new mobility and living culture? You can take a time. I can also say it again.
Well, I'm going to leap in. It seems to me that the most striking issue is the same issue that it's been for 100 years, which is about the dominance of the car as a mode of mobility, and what the problems caused by that, and how we transcend or move beyond that. Particularly, of course, in the light of the climate crisis, but also the other, externalities, the side effects of car-dependent mobility.
Yeah, and so it's a good point. It's an important point. And so when we think about the future, and we will have a car-oriented city, we'll have the human-centered city. What is the most striking issue, in your opinion, at this moment to illuminate? And when we think about a new mobility culture which will arise and, yes, change the world.
Yeah, I mean, I think from our perspective, we still see this kind of techno-optimism that's dominating policy decision-making. And so everybody's sitting around waiting for the electrification and automation of automobiles and new technologies, the new shiny objects that are going to save our cities and save our species. And we keep banging on with this idea that the technology we need, we already invented 150 years ago, be it the bicycle, the tram, the train. And we really need to look back to those technologies and hopefully rediscover them as mobility devices. And it's very difficult for politicians that are looking for positive press and to be seen as progressive and forward thinking, that this idea that the antiquated, humble, old-fashioned bicycle may be the best technology that we can use to face these ahead.
I think another focus, what I would like to see in this more human-focused or human-centered urban mobility future is one that really recognizes the different ways that people move around at a human scale. So I think there are some cities that do it well, but thinking about how people move when they're walking at all ages. We talked about moving around with toddlers or babies, you move a little slower. As we age, we move a little slower. So how do we allow for those people to enjoy life in place for longer, but then also taking into account people with varying mobility challenges, be they sight impaired or moving around in a mobility scooter or with a walker. How the city of the future, to me, makes room for all those people to share that space comfortably and without a lot of stress and without a lot of challenge. Makes it much more seamless and easy for them to access their city and the world around them.
Mm-hmm. Seamlessness is one point here the people pointed out, and experimental. Yeah, I hear from your side, Melissa, you promote for more experiments, yeah, and diverse things of moving around and human-centered mobility. Perhaps Maximilian would be great. What would be the future of, in Munich, for example, new mobility in culture in Munich?
I think the one word that comes to my mind is mindset change. It's just a striking change of everything. Get rid of the roads like we know it, get rid of the roads. And for me, it's all about logistics also. So how do we get all the stuff from the outside, like food and all the stuff inside, and keeping all the bicycles and the people, well, walking without just striking them. So, and as for me, it's a behavioral change we need, and this must be the future. Like we are actively mobile in our mind and trying to think about new and this change. I don't know, here we are quite a conservative city, at least compared to Berlin. I think it's a mindset change happening. And it's something like this, helping in steps, doing it, like finding more people for the critical mass. So I think it's a mindset change that is really feelable. You can touch it in the city.
So perhaps yes,
Martina, can I jump in? So I'm curious about thanks for all four. Maximilian, I'm really triggered and curious about the word mindset change. I fully agree. I think it's also about mindset change, and I'm curious. We've been through crisis recently. I think I don't need to name the pandemic or even just longer term crisis, as we all know, climate change or different types of crisis. And I think that when you look at active mobility, there's also something to do there, something to kind of these crises can be moments in which people change behaviors due to necessity, or sometimes due to just change in the environment of things that are possible to do, or places they need to go, or just not being able to be close to other person for safety reasons. And so I wonder kind of, how, if any of you kind of want to reflect on kind of that mindset shift, and whether you've seen encouraging trends, and you see whether we can anchor those on the long term. So, we've seen cycling boom in some cities due to COVID, and whether that's, how do we make it so that it stays, that it grows, that it kind of, that mindset change is sustainable and just doesn't disappear once COVID is managed and the cars are, or the public transport or whatever else is just, you can go back to normal, if you know what I mean.
Is in terms of making a lot of the positive changes that have happened over the last 18 months more permanent, and even changes that were happening before that, is political will. And so there are cities that we've seen where, Paris comes to mind, or even Milan, where they're making that very permanent change. Unfortunately, I was just in Canada, and I'm seeing some of those changes being turned back now that things are getting better, kind of. And so I think that political will plays a really big role in that mindset change. So it's not just the mindset change of us as individuals and as residents, but also of our leaders, understanding that importance of having a shift in the way they think about city planning and how we move through it.
Yes, so when we saw the last contribution in the film from Hagen Damwert in Berlin, he was lying, but he was actively mobile. And so I think this was a good picture that it starts with our own, as Maximilian told, it's a change in our own mobility. And I think when I saw the whole film, it came up to me, active mobility is so diverse. When I look outside, there are skateboarders, inline skater, whatever, rollerblading. Active mobility starts when you're lying and you move your own, yeah? It's a physical aspect. And what I take from your opinions is, it came up to me, think free and move free. And as I cycled around in my city, there was a woman saying to her kid, "You're standing in the middle of the road." There's a woman to a toddler, which takes its first steps on the pathway of our city, while we make our own way along it on our bicycles, as a paved road is difficult to navigate. And so this was a really, when I think during our process of the film, and it came up to me, it really starts with our own opinion. And do you all think we should be more experimental? Should we go back to David Harvey, reclaim our city spaces in different kinds, in a different way? Should we be more, when I say it in Tim Gill, perhaps more like kids? Should we be more creative in our own movie? Not only in the context we have to create. I'm an architect for sure. I love to create good context for you, but I think what came up to me is, don't we change? Does we not have to change our mind to be more experimental in our own and think free and then move free?
I mean, I can't speak for all of the cities that are in this chat, but certainly in London and in some other British cities, and I hear from Melissa in some Canadian cities, there is a big political, maybe even an ethical battle. I mean, it's a kind of culture war. I mean, these are overused words, but I think there is a real conflict about the future of mobility in many cities, and it's intractable. It's hard to see a way through it, but I think that, and I argue in my book, that bringing children into the picture helps. It's not, helps to move the conversation on from, drivers versus cyclists, for example. And part of the reason it does that is because when we think about children, we can't help but think about the future. We can't help but think a little bit more collectively. But I think it's also partly because a child's eye view is a fresh view, because children do experiment. Everything they see and do is new to them. And so that playfulness, that experimentation, that the power of their emotions, whether it's joy or fear or distress or elation, those emotions can cut through some of that noise and trauma or dissonance, some of the challenges of this debate about urban mobility. So yes, you've made me think maybe we need to talk a little bit more about children, not just as a kind of vessel for thinking about the future, but also because of what it's like to be a child in a city. Yeah.
Let's see others. Julian, you like to add?
Yeah, I'd love to react if no one else wants to say something right now. But I think that's a really good point, Tim. I love the phrase "the power of their emotions," and I feel like that was kind of the missing link for me as well when I was thinking about it. And you phrased it so beautifully. Is that we often, I'm going to use a strong word, but use children to advocate for better cities, because it is also a very convenient kind of perspective to take in order to say you can't, like, no one wishes like bad on children, and therefore, like, if it's in their interest, it's not politically debatable that something that's good for children is good, in general. So it's been also, I think, a very powerful advocacy lens to use well-being of children to advocate for better cities. But what I really like with what you just said is also inspiring ourselves in the way that we design and experience mobility from their approach, their kind of experimental nature, exploratory nature. And I think that connects also quite well with conscious mobility, because we're also trying to ground mobility into the present, into the conscious experimental, the experience of the environment around us. Connects also, I think, to the well-being topic quite well. And so I think that's a very interesting approach of, using children, not just because what's good for them is good and should be apolitical, but it's also because they can help us revisit the experience of space and of the mobility. I love this outlook. Thanks for sharing that.
Thank you. There's a nice answer in the chat. I like the idea of reclaiming to move freely for active mobility as a slogan: free rights for free citizens. Freie Fahrt für freie Bürger. So nice. Maximilian and Anja, in Munich, we like to add anything to this debate on reclaim your space and move free?
Anja, you first. Ladies
Yeah,
first.
I'm still thinking about having children involved in designing or creating ideas for new systems of transportation or new combinations of forms of mobility, maybe, because I was just thinking about myself when I was a kid, driving in the car together with my mom, and we were stuck in the traffic. I asked simple questions like, why is this like this? And why do cars, why are there not self-moving little things that drive you from A to B, and you say, hey, I want to go there, and then that picks you up and drives you there. And then I was thinking that it would be great if they could fly in different heights, so that the faster you want to go, the higher you fly. And so I had wild thoughts, which I don't have anymore because I lost all of this experimentation thoughts, and have the restrictions of, oh, that's not possible, that's too complicated, that's expensive, whatever. And that's why I'm at the moment thinking about the idea you just were developing, how we can get this power of emotion of children into the creation of ideas.
Thank you.
I just jump back from the transformation change perspective. I think what is necessary at first is a sense of urgency. Create a sense of urgency. So why, for God's sake, you just were telling this, Julian, or you too, Martina, like we had a lot of development also with cycling roads here in Munich, but now they're taking them back. I think it was also Melissa telling us. But there is no, I don't know if you take the cars, there is no need to change because they dominated it again. And they not seem to get the point, right? We have Fridays for Future, we have Conscious Cities, we have all that stuff. And it's all good, believe me. But somehow the voice seems not to, I don't know, not to be loud enough. I don't have a clue, but seems to me a bit more sense of urgency for everybody to understand. The second one is give me a vision. And you guys, you create a vision even better than I can do that. But you have a good vision. And last but not least, and this is what I can really connect to Tim, for example, is give me a quick win, make it touchable, make it feelable that it's good. It's a good thing. Also, if I look at the chat with this piece, I also have an idea of it's a war between the e-scooters and the bicycles and all the other guys. But if I experience it's all together, then it's working. We have this is great for Munich. This is really a change. We have parking lots for e-scooters. For God's sake, the city is clapping like, yeah, we have a change here. So, but then it's working better because the people know where to place their e-scooter and it's not on the boardwalk, on the sidewalk. So I think this could be a good idea to make it more feelable and the sense of urgency. Keep on creating it and give me a vision. You guys seem to be quite good in it. So yeah, keep on going.
And from my part, I love to hear your vision. I'm a transformative researcher, and so your vision is inspiring me. And so, but here, when we have a look in the chat, connecting to the inner child within us, time for extinction, rebellion. So it's like a revolution. We have to do so. When I hear it, revolution beginning and starting with our mind. And so when I look at the Brundtlet, family Brundtlet, they are, in my opinion, change maker in this field. And when we look back to Annick, as you remember in the film, we saw also from the child perspective, and I found it really nice. At the end, yeah, he makes this thing to his mom, yeah, and so it was reflective. It was intuitive thinking he was doing, and so you see the social benefits behind mobility. And Melissa and Chris described this beautiful in their book. What are the social benefits behind mobility? When you spend time with your children, when you are together, it's really inclusive time. And so perhaps we could. I say one citation. We wanted to offer them the same liberation and self-determination experience by most Dutch children, from the Brundtlet and the Kervin-Trevick book. And so perhaps we can connect this to the well-being. It is really a quality time when we move around. We saw active mobility and conscious mobility are connected to healthy benefits, but indeed, and this was inspiring for me, to social benefits. And perhaps we can also think about the well-being factor. So does it start directly with the active mobility? And I would love to hear your opinion, Anja. What do you think? What do you like to say regarding well-being in this kind?
Yeah, as you know, like that's really what I think is very important, that if we try to find new solutions, we should not have the goal in mind how to make it, like find the technical possible solution or the cheapest solution, but think of how that like influences us, but also like the nature around us, because the nature around us also contributes to our well-being, like animals, air, environment, I don't have to tell you, but also human needs, like what we thought of in Julian's journey exercise we did at the beginning, where you all said that you also could enjoy your trips, and it was not only waste of time or loss of time for getting from A to B. So I think it's important to have in mind what needs do we have? How can we create an environment that makes it easier to fulfill these needs, and how can we be like in balance with the world around us, as like guiding questions for the new solutions.
Thanks a lot. So I like this type of self-determination, and when we think mobility culture, it is perhaps a decision-making process, yeah? We are starting from, what do you mean?
You're asking me?
All of you, it is a real decision-making process you have to bring into your mind before you're walking and moving around. It is this point we have to discuss, and then we can decide correctly regarding a digital world we live in and the natural world. And so we have it in our hands and our minds to decide what and why and in which way we are moving around. And so
I'll make a connection here, maybe to a point that I think Tim, Melissa, and Chris raised a little bit earlier. I think it's important to think about indeed the way that we can change our approach to mobility, but prioritizing all of these things that Anya, you just mentioned, our well-being, how it makes us feel, the planet, it needs to seep into decision making. It needs to go into why is that not the priority when someone who is in the power of making a decision or investing a budget or something like that. These are not the criteria at the moment that are being considered in the politics, in the decision making when doing decisions that will shape space. So I would say, I would agree with you, Martina, that it's also about our personal experiences, and as space shapers, if you're an architect also as well, but there's also a lot of it that goes into advocating, voting, organizing, influencing the system in which decisions are made, so that these factors become at least as relevant or even prioritized as opposed to other, economic efficiencies or whatever. And we also need to be able to maybe measure or quantify somehow those benefits that we're talking about, so that we can talk about them together, or showcase that they're also as good and as powerful than the other ones that are maybe now used for decision making, like rentability or return on investment, all the other things. So how do we build these things into the return on investment decisions and thinking of people who are going to be spending the money that is needed to shape the cities in which we live? So I think, to me, that's how I would connect kind of the dots here and kind of think, yes, it's about ourselves, but it's also about the politics. And I'm very much on the side of advocacy here and political influence, and also saying that that's also something we should be focusing on.
Yeah, thanks a lot.
So when we were doing the journey exercise, the last question you asked around, how would that experience change the child? It's funny because a lot of the work Chris and I do is bringing international politicians, leaders, people working in the field here to show them what cycling is like here, to bring those ideas and adopt them for their own cities. But similarly, if you've never experienced the city from the perspective of a child, or if you don't remember we've all experienced it as a child, but if you don't remember it from when you were a child, or if you're not moving around with children yourself, you lose some of that perspective. And so I'm not saying we should have like a group of children walk around with politicians all the time, but maybe that might help in some cities to get to understand that perspective. We use the similar sort of thinking when we're talking about designing for people with disabilities, is you can't design for them if you don't understand their experience. So it's very difficult to figure out how do we do that on a very broad scale, but it is about, just changing those mindsets involves changing that experience for them. And you can only get that through experiencing the world from the perspective of like the Bernard van Leer foundation does, from the perspective of a very small child, or from the perspective of somebody on a bicycle or walking or using a mobility device. So yeah, I think you bringing that into how do we consciously change the way people experience mobility is one of the steps, and hopefully changing that mindset.
Yes, thank you. It depends on our own mindset, but on the political and cultural system. And so one point was important for me, come to me, we have segregation, polarization processes. A lot of infrastructural implementations are made, especially in Berlin at the moment, in the middle, but we also have to think about the other perspectives, the marginalized groups, and the people who have to move from outside to the inside and have not always the chance to decide on their own how they want to move, because they have to move like this because they cannot any longer live in the city because it's too expensive, for example. And so thanks a lot. Unfortunately, we come nearly to the end of the discussion round. And I would love if we could make a short round where you say what is in your mind, what came up, what you would give out to the end of this discussion round. Would be nice. Who would like to start?
I would just, I think, second what Julian was saying about the importance of political decision making. We live in a city where 80% of the journeys are made by active mobility, and that's not because the citizens are more enlightened or more conscious or more environmentally aware. Those decisions are made because the streets are designed as welcoming and inclusive spaces. Over 50 years of innovating, experimenting, some accidents and very single vote decisions along the way that got the city to this point. But without those kind of political decisions, Delft could look like virtually any other city in the world, which is completely car dominated and car dependent.
Thank you.
Yeah, I really want to second that. And in the last 5 minutes, there's been a sort of a train of thought in my head, which is, you could get a group of people who love driving their cars to talk about their subjective experiences of mobility and how great it is that, they can listen to whatever music they like, they're out of the rain, maybe if they're not very fit or just don't like walking or cycling that much, it's wonderful that they can step out of their front door, get into a nice cozy box, and so that sort of, and that's for them, that's conscious mobility. So just grounding your advocacy in an individualistic description of our subjective experience of mobility, right. I think it's a trap because it completely ignores the political and the moral dimensions of not just our choices, but the choices of our, and the power relationships. So the power and the politics that shape mobility. So I'm really pleased to hear that we've got onto that topic. I'm not saying we should ignore the, if you like, the phenomenological, but we need to take the conversation on from just what might end up being an argument about which is the nicest way to travel, because that is not ground on which I think we those of us who want to see more active mobility and more sustainable travel, that is not a battle that I think we would easily win.
Thank you. Important insight. Perhaps Maximilian, your final wording? I would love to hear it.
I think keep on moving, but do it consciously. Keep changing.
Thank you. It's a good final wording. And so my dear colleagues, Julian and Anja, what do you like to say?
I think my big takeaway from this discussion is that when we define conscious design or conscious mobility, there's a part of it that's really about the experience, the sensorial experience. I think it's important to explore this, but only when, in my opinion, it's a tool for achieving bigger change. And so what Melissa was saying, like we can get people out in the streets with children to experience it, but that's not the aim in itself. The aim is kind of using the experiential power, the power of emotion that Tim was saying, as a tool for change that affects the system. So for me, out of this discussion, I'm actually reframing what I consider conscious design a little bit here to kind of in that way, if that makes sense. And I'll pass it on to Anya.
Yeah, I would connect to what Max said before about change management, because I'm also working in this field of mindset change of people. So I think that for the politicians and decision makers, we really need to find great visions and not only say we don't want this, but propose a vision which works and is also inclusive. And for like all the other people, I think it's good to try to motivate each individual, but it's easier to shape the environment like this, that the easiest option, the fastest or most enjoyable option is the one which is good, and then people will decide for this because it's then not an effort, but it's easy.
Thank you. So here comes in the chat one beautiful thing, that changes when citizens have the final word. So I think we had the discussion and we have to continue this dialogue in the future. And I like to thank you all that you contributed in our films. We can enjoy it again later. And so I just have to say you have a great weekend. Listen perhaps to our conclusion we will make now, and I will pass on to my colleague Anya now. And just say thank you. You are invited to come to Berlin, and I'm happy to see you in Delft, Munich, Amsterdam, and in London. And so looking forward for the future. Thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Thanks.
So now we did an interactive journey. We watched the film, we had a discussion, and our 2 hours are almost over. The last 10 minutes we would like to use for some concluding thoughts and to give you all the information where you can find links, resources, and how you can connect with us if you would like to follow on this discussion. So for the concluding thoughts, maybe I would like to ask you, Julian and Martina, what are your main takeaways now from our event, from the exercise, from the film, from the discussion, from all the answers in the chat, from the Zoom discussions? What are your main takeaways from this event, or what did you find most inspiring?
Julian, should you like to start off?
Sure, I can start. I think I'm going to be short. I think that I just formulated my main takeaway in the group discussion as well. I think what I'm taking from this is a little bit of a reframing of conscious design as exploring the experiential part of design, but as a tool for political change. And that's kind of going to be my personal definition of conscious design from now on until I get a new input that makes me change it further. So that's kind of what I take away from this session.
I nearly go along with this from Julian. My main takeaway is that I was inspired, I can say, and so inspired by all the diverse views, which is active mobility for the people. And from my own research approach, I'm inspired that the people mainly connected conscious mobility to social benefits, as for example, participation in urban events and interaction in the space with people, so spatially seen. And from the conscious Berlin chapter part, my main takeaway is the new connections, new networking, which gained, and so we can go forward with. So thank you, Anya, for your question.
So I also have a question for both of you. This one's more about process. So what kind of did we learn from? What did you two learn from the process of collaborative participatory process of putting a video together, organizing that session, kind of bringing our different approaches together? Maybe Anya, if you want to start.
Yes, sure. So I think what I really value is that when you collect different perspectives, they are sometimes so different that you couldn't even imagine how different they can be. And yeah, that's always the great part. I think the more difficult part is that when you work together with people from other disciplines or other thoughts, you sometimes need more time to explain what you mean because you kind of speak another language. So I think that's always the trade-off when doing interdisciplinary work, but the benefit is that you are not stuck in your own circles of thinking, but you get new ideas.
Thank you. Yeah, I go along with Anja with the last point. I would say I'm all the more convinced that we have to do it in a collaborative way, interdisciplinary and participatory guided. When we think about sustainability relevant topics, as is the case with mobility. And so to shed light on what we really need to do, to concretize what we have to do from the human part and from the urban context part. But at the same time, I go along with Anja, interdisciplinary and participatory challenges us, planners, participants, residents, whoever, because it's time spending, communication spending, but the benefits, you see the benefits, and for the future, I look forward, for the reflection of our work. So with this comes my question to you. What is also challenging when we think of the global perspective, we always have to handle an international work and the locally specific perspective. And so my question is, how do you see the interplay of CCD's global decentralized work we do and the local implementation and mediation of projects? Perhaps
To start, yeah, sure, no problem. I think that for me, the work that we do, the research, the questions that come up have to be always kind of coming out of the local I found myself exposed to, and so sorry, can you hear me?
Yes. Yes.
I can't hear anything anymore, but if you can hear me, it's okay.
We can hear you.
From kind of the environment in which I'm exposed to, so that's the local level, and then kind of what the CCD really provides is the opportunity to test those ideas and theories with other perspectives and connect them there. So this is kind of how I see the connections there, is being able to take ideas and then develop them further with, as Anja was saying, different perspectives, different fields. I'll stop here. I think I'm having technical difficulties. I hope you can hear me.
Thank you.
Yeah, I think I understood the most. And yeah, I think the strong part about the CCD is that it's an international network and so has more reputation than any local initiative. And yeah, it's a strong approach to do it like globally and locally, because one solution does not fit all, like obviously, and it always needs to be adapted. I think what could be like developed further is that we use more synergy effects and that we have even more exchange about experiences and knowledge sharing. So yeah, I think it's already great that it exists, but it could be even stronger.
Thank you. I go along with this and looking forward what will come in the future from globally side with you guys, and how will we implement projects in Amsterdam, Munich, and Berlin. And so for the last word from my side, I'd like to thank you for this common journey we did the last month. It was hard work. And I just like to thank you. It was wonderful that we made it all with such many efforts and all the power we had. And so thanks. And I pass it on to you. The last slide.
So yes, last slide from our side. If you like to keep in touch with us, you find links on the slide. If you want to watch the movie, read a paper we wrote in advance, or watch the recording of today on YouTube, you will also find the links here. And I think I speak for all of us when I say thank you very, very much for your contribution, for being here, for thinking with us, for discussing with us, for just being interested in the topic. And if you would like to keep in touch, we are very happy. And yeah, if not, spread the word. Would you like to add something? I don't know.
No, just thanks to everyone, and I think we can close this discussion. Well, you can look up on the website for recordings and links, which I'm sure the CCD will share widely to everyone who attended.
Yes.
Have a
You
nice
will find our YouTube channel, Conscious Berlin. Thank you all.